Hi everybody, so today I've got my first impressions of the Elites section of the Eldar codex. Now keep in mind, again, this is just my first thoughts on having read through the section and really thought about it a little bit. I haven't had any games to test it out, so don't hold me to to my little views that I have now, just having kind of looked at the book. But these are my first thoughts on the codex of the Elite section. So the first thing I'd say is that the Elite section is just as niche as it used to be. So that has not changed. You know, the Elites in this codex are not the kind of thing that you build an entire army around. They're just like before. They're the kind of thing that you take to shore up some holes in your army, or to maybe try to cover a weakness. So none of them are really mandatory in your army, but they do have some interesting options. Let's start with the first one that's been pretty controversial. Howling Banshees. They didn't necessarily get very much better. A lot of people would argue they got worse. It's hard to argue that they're not particularly desirable because they don't look like they're going to survive on the table very well. There's no way to get them into combat safely without having to have them on the table for a whole turn. It's really hard to see how you're going to get a lot of use out of them. I'm not saying that you shouldn't consider them at all. I'm just saying it's hard to see how you're going to really benefit greatly from unit of these guys on the table. Their Banshee Mask's a little different than before. It used to give them initiative 10. Now it lowers the initiative of the thing they're fighting down by 5. In most cases, that means they're going to be striking first against whatever they fight, but it's no longer quite as guaranteed. It's actually a lot weaker than the initiative 10 that it used to be. They also don't have offensive grenades, so if they charge something in terrain, they're going to be at best striking simultaneous with it. And Banshees do not like striking simultaneously or going last because they do not have great armor, and their toughness is of course crappy Eldar toughness. With the fact that they get run bonuses, you definitely want to have these guys on the table. That doesn't mean you don't want to start them off in a Wave Serpent. I think if you are going to try to use these guys, you start them in a Wave Serpent. The first turn, you move that Serpent up to unload them somewhere, and after that, they have to spend the game running around trying to charge things, if that's how you're going to use them. Not my favorite unit in this codex, though, upon first glance, for sure. Definitely not my favorite unit. Let's talk about Striking Scorpions. Some nice big boosts to these guys. We've talked about some of them. Their weapon is AP 6. They come standard with move through cover, infiltrate, and stealth. All great things. They gain battle focus, which is actually not so useless on these guys, considering their pistols are shuriken weapons. And because we don't have assault vehicles, these guys might end up being on the table a lot. So having the ability to run an early turn is not a bad thing. And also coming out of a vehicle, coming out of a Wave Serpent, it's nice to have that little extra run move after shooting, or and the fact that they have fleet now as well is a huge boost. So when they run, when they assault, they're going to get huge benefits. So that fleet really helps these guys get into assaults. Now, Manda Blasters got weakened in some ways. In one way, it's better in that you get it as a kind of almost like a Hammer of Wrath type attack, but in another way, it's a lot weaker because it's only Strength 3. So you don't get the benefit of your Scorpion Sword on that. Now, a lot of people would argue that against a lot of things, that going first with the Manda Blaster is actually better. Now, that said, these guys are still hard to survive on the table. They're going to get shot up a lot. So I think the best way to field them is going to be inside a Wave Serpent that outflanks, because you show up from the flank, you move your 6 inches, you unload those guys 6 inches, then your Wave Serpent can fire at the side armor of something with its really good Strength 7 shield gun. I really see that as a great way to use these guys. And meanwhile, they fly on 6 inches, they pop out 6 inches, maybe they run and shoot their guns even. They can actually gain a lot from being inside a Wave Serpent and coming off of an outflank. Starting on the table, infiltrated, it's not a bad idea, but I think they're going to get shot up a lot if you do that. Especially given that there's a lot of Flamer templates out there, Helldrake templates, that kind of stuff. Now, the one real shame with these guys is there's no way to give them a Warlock, and there's no easy way to put a Spirit Seer in the unit. If you could put a Spirit Seer in this unit very easily, you can give them a 2+ cover save, because that Spirit Seer can take Conceal, which stacks with... can take Conceal, which gives Shrouded, which stacks with the Stealth, right? But unfortunately, the way that Infiltrate works, because they're always Infiltrators, you cannot put independent characters during the deployment phase that do not have Infiltrate with a unit of Infiltrators. That's really a big shame, because that would be a great way to give these guys some survivability. Now, you can still put a Spirit Seer into the unit, in the first turn of the game, but it means that your range on infiltrating them is going to have to be controlled so that you can actually fit your Spirit Seer in there. I do think putting a Spirit Seer in these guys as soon as possible is a good way to keep them alive with that extra shrouded save. So give these guys some really good survivability as they run through terrain on the table. Something to think about. Fire Dragons, their guns haven't changed. Melt-A-Bomb's still there. They've gained that interesting running ability before or after, which means that's going to make it much more likely their Meltas are going to be in Melta range. That's a really good thing. And their armor is a lot better. And they didn't really go up that much in point cost when you consider they gained the Battle Focus ability and they gained a better armor. And that better armor, it's not going to suddenly keep these guys from getting killed, but it will keep them from getting killed by piddly little things, piddly little shots. A lot of times the old Fire Dragons, your opponent can just fire maybe a couple of Storm Bolters at the unit and just see what happens, and sometimes 3 or 4 Storm Bolters would wipe out the whole unit, and your opponent would be able to say, oh, well, great, now I don't have to waste firing my good stuff at them. Well, now they're really going to have to fire their good stuff at these guys. You can't just hit one template, AP4 barrage, kill the whole unit. That's not going to happen anymore with Armor 3+. So I actually like that change to these guys. I like the change to them. I know that we know that they were a little bit too cheap in the previous edition, and with that extra armor bonus and the battle focus, I think they're still definitely worth the points. Something to consider if you need some short-ranged Meltas in your army. Jumping ahead, let's go to the next unit that we need to talk about in the Elite section, and that is the Harlequins. So they have not changed terribly much. The point costs have been tweaked a little bit, but not really enough to my liking. I still think they're a little bit expensive for what they do, and without the ability to give them easily fortune, because you can't guarantee fortune anymore, I really struggle to see how this unit is going to survive once they've actually hit a unit. So once they've gotten into battle with one unit, somewhere in the middle of the board probably, suddenly that Veil of Tears is not going to protect them as well. And Veil of Tears went back to being the old style, where it's 2d6 times 2 spotting distance. So that's a pretty powerful ability. It won't work very well when they are already in the thick of things. It might keep them alive on the way to combat, but it won't help them once they've already had to fight something. I'm not loving these guys, but then again, a lot of people do really like them, so I got to give that respect to people who actually really like them. They have not changed significantly much since the old edition, other than their defensive ability is a lot better. So something to think about with those guys. And that brings us to Wraithguard and Wraithblades. Of course, they can be made into troops with Spirit Seer, which personally I think is the best possible way to use them, because they are very tough, survivable troops in that kind of regard. But if you're using them as elites, they still offer some compelling things. I think the Wraithguard are more compelling overall than the Wraithblades. And the reason for that is a Strength 10 AP2 gun is useful all the time. All the time. And it's going to be helping you insta-kill a lot of those Tau battles, the broadside battle suits, let you insta-kill things like Nurgle, Chaos Obliterators. There's some nasty stuff in competitive lists that Strength 10 AP2 gun really helps against. The guys with the Flamers, the AP2 Flamers, are going to be great coming out of a Wave Serpent, and same with the regular Wraithguard. With the Wraith Cannons, they are going to really enjoy coming out of a Wave Serpent. To get unloaded in a better position to blast something, to be protected on the way in, those minimum units are actually useful now, whereas before they were not very useful. Now, unfortunately, you can't get fortune on these guys very easily, but they did get a little bit cheaper. I see a lot of use for the Wraithguard with the Wraith Cannons, and potentially even the guys with the Flamers. The Wraithblades, so we got the 2-sword option, or as we see here, the Axe and Invulnerable Save option. They're not bad. I think people are gonna find that those melee Wraithguard are only going to be used really in sort of theme armies or niche armies, like Yanden style armies, where you want to have melee stuff and you want to have it on the board. I still think putting them in a Wave Serpent is a good way to deliver them. That Wave Serpent is a very good vehicle on its own. Plus, it can put these guys in position a lot quicker. Even if the first turn you go flat out. If you take these guys with a melee version, I think the Axe and Invulnerable Save is a little bit better, because you want to be able to survive plasma cannon shooting, things like that. But I think whichever version you take, putting it in a Wave Serpent is a great idea, because you're going to want to push these guys into your opponent. They're the ones that can really go and try to take some objectives. So, and even then, even if you're not pushing them into the opponent, being able to move around better in the Wave Serpent is a good thing, and they're so survivable that it doesn't hurt so much to have to pop them out a turn early. You know, if they're if you're using them as troops, you put them on objective, or if you want to use them as a denial unit, you know, they can survive a round of fire, hopefully. The guys with the invulnerable save a lot better than the other ones though, because you know, their armor's not going to help them against things that are AP 3 or better. So that's something to think about. I think overall, the real stars of the elite section are really the Fire Dragons and the Wraith Guard. So the Wraith Guard being tough versions of like Fire Dragons, if you will, that can really kind of contest or hold an objective if they become troops. And the and as we know, the Fire Dragons still being excellent at what they do, and a lot more survivable now with that better armor. So I think those are the real stars. You know, an honorable mention goes to the Striking Scorpions, because they are much better than they used to be. They're still a little bit pricey, and they're still tricky to use, because now that they're permanent infiltrators, you won't be able to put a lot of characters with them to start the game. And it would have been great to put like a Spirit Seer in that unit, get Conceal, or put a Farseer in them right at the start of the game. But it looks like you can't do that based on the way the rules are worded. You're going to have to, you know, maneuver carefully to put a guy in on the first turn, and of course, as soon as you need to create conditions like that, you never know what's going to happen, right? But honorable mention for them, because they are going to be a lot better at what they do, and they do seem compelling with all those abilities that they have. The ability to skit around in the middle of the board, really just charging stuff and being a credible threat. And I should mention the Scorpion's Claw strikes in initiative order. It is not unwieldy, which is probably why it costs 30 points to give it to your Exarch, which is an insane number of points, but it potentially could be worth it, because you can really rip into some Marines with it, and it's so nice that it goes in initiative order. It's too bad about the Mandy Blasters no longer granting you an extra attack, because that was a great way to get an extra claw attack in the old book, but that's you know, that's gone now. And in terms of things I'm not terribly impressed with. Not terribly impressed with the Howling Banshees still. Not terribly impressed with the Harlequins, and not terribly impressed with the Wraith Blades, although I wouldn't sort of put them in the same negative kind of connotation. There's some interesting things to be done if you're playing a theme army, but I'm not crazy about these guys in an average army, because we are a shooty army, and not having any shooting on these guys is going to be a challenge. Now, I do want to say, this is just my first reaction. I suspect that as I play games with this codex, I'm going to really want to have something that can deny, that can contest objectives, that can survive, you know, in melee with something. And like something like the guys with the axe and the shield, they're actually going to be able to do that. So I have a sneaking suspicion my view of these guys is going to change as I play games. But right now, I'm not, you know, blown away by it. So thanks guys for watching again. I hope that was informative, and I hope that somehow it gave you some ideas for your own Eldar army. The Elite section still has some niche units. They're not mandatory for your army, but they have some really good benefits if you do put them to use correctly. Thanks guys, and keep watching.